Hello, my name is Tim Kite. I have been an employee of Unified School District 322 for a long time. I've been asked to talk to you today about the history of the Onaga School District and some of the different changes that have happened over the years that I've been around. I was a high school English teacher, journalism teacher, football coach, wrestling coach for these past 40 years. I'm still doing a little bit of work with the yearbook staff this year, but otherwise I've retired from full-time teaching and coaching as of the end of this year. I began in the fall of 1976. I was 23 years old then. I'm a little bit older than that now. I was assigned to be an assistant football coach. I was assigned to be a junior class play sponsor. I was assigned to be the K's sponsor. I was the forensics coach, and I was a senior class play sponsor in my first year. And that was fairly typical for a first year teacher to be loaded up, especially an English teacher, to be loaded up with all kinds of those extra duties and so forth, because people who had been around for a while knew how to get out from under those kinds of things. But it was a good experience for me, and I continued to do forensics for about 3 or 4 years. I did class plays for 3 or 4 more years. We changed that situation from class plays to all school plays, and that would have been about around 1980 or so, something like that. And again, I was an assistant football coach, and we did not have a wrestling program here at Onaga at that time. After 6 years after my first 6 years of teaching here at Onaga, I moved, and I had gotten married, and my wife worked in Manhattan, and so I took a job in the St. Mary's School District, and it was there for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, they had a reduction in force, and I was a victim of that because I was one of the newer people that had been hired there. In the meantime, my old job at Onaga came open again, and I had not left because I had been unhappy at Onaga. I was just trying to get myself into a different situation where my wife and I weren't doing so much driving to get to our places of work. So I came back here. I had been involved in wrestling at St. Mary's and began to wonder, as soon as I came back here, whether or not we could start a wrestling program. I came to the conclusion that I thought we could, did some research, tried to get my ducks in a row, presented the idea to the school board, even showed them a 16mm film that the Kansas State High School Activities Association had to introduce schools to the sport of wrestling, and we ended up starting a wrestling program in the, I guess it would be the fall semester of 1985, and that's been going on for 31 years now. So those are some of the kinds of things I've done at Onaga. I was an assistant football coach 31 times, and then this last school year I was the head football coach. I was the wrestling coach for 30 years here at Onaga, and was an assistant wrestling coach for 2 years at St. Mary's. So here at Onaga I've got 30 years of football in, and I've got 30 years of head wrestling experience here at Onaga, so I've coached 60 sports seasons here, and that's a lot. A slightly different topic I've been asked to talk about today is the consolidation of the school districts, and that really had happened before I arrived. As I said earlier, I came in about 1976, and I think the unification of school districts in Kansas, I don't know the exact year, but I think that was pretty much completed in the mid-1960s. So before that time, Wheaton had its own school district, Onaga had its own school district, Havensville had its own school district. I don't know about Duluth. I don't know if they ever had their own school district or not. It wouldn't surprise me. From what I've learned, at one time almost every school was its own district. That was deemed to be financially inefficient by the state, and so they mandated unification, and they are the ones who decided that Havensville, Onaga, and Wheaton would all be in this, and Duluth would all be in the same school district. And I believe that was completed around 1965 or 1966, sometime close to that. There was still some resentment when I came here on the parts of some of the people in Wheaton and some of the people in Havensville about having to have their kids go to school at Onaga. Havensville and Onaga were rivals. Wheaton and Onaga were rivals. Havensville and Wheaton were probably rivals. We competed against one another, and that's always difficult when you have two rival schools that end up being put together and expected to cooperate and work together. When I got here in 1976, Wheaton still had a first grade through sixth grade program, and Havensville still had a first grade through eighth grade program. The Wheaton school was closed, I'm going to say, around 1980, maybe a little bit earlier or later than that. And then the Havensville school was closed completely, I believe, in about 2003 or 4, something like that. That's always hard on people when a school closes. You have lots of things to deal with. What do you do with that building? You know, does your town lose its identity? And I think all of those things are difficult for small towns, but unfortunately the economics of the situation usually dictate that that's going to end up happening. Another topic I've been asked to talk to you about is changes to the building and expansions and things like that. Probably the biggest change there has been the project that was completed and we moved into in 1994, where the grade school and the high school buildings were tied together. That they were originally two separate buildings. I believe the original portion of this building that we're in right now, this high school was built, I believe, in about 1957, and give or take a couple of years. I'm not sure when the grade school building was done. I know there have been about 2 different grade school buildings over there. But in 1994, the 2 buildings were tied together. Several classrooms were added. The new library was added in that. The music rooms were added at that time. So all of that was added and tied the 2 buildings together. And then the other piece to that more people see is the new gym on the north part of the facility. An interesting thing to me is that one of the selling points to doing that expansion in that facility was that we would have 2 gyms, so there would be there would never again be any more late basketball practice for anybody. The girls would have one gym and the boys would have the other gym, and then they would rotate between the 2 gyms each and every other week. But nobody would have late basketball practice ever anymore. Well, it was kind of humorous to me because on the very first day that we were going to have basketball practice when we had the new gym, a lot of people were running around going, well, who's going to have early practice and who's going to have late practice? And nobody seemed to really kind of get the idea that that wasn't supposed to be happening anymore. So that's the biggest building expansion. I believe that the ag building was almost brand new when I got here in 1976. It may be a few years older than that. I remember we used to have meetings out there in the fall because it was air conditioned, and none of the rest of the school classrooms anywhere were air conditioned. We had noisy fans that we had to try to teach over the noise of for a month or two when school first started, but we did not have any air conditioning at all. General changes to the school in the past 40 years. Well, I would say mostly it's been people. I've kind of talked to you already today about the changes to the facility and so on, and my part there. But really it's people that make a school. I was lucky to have gotten to teach with Coach Rosenfield. He was still here teaching when I arrived, and he taught for another 6 or 8 years. I believe when I came back from my 2 years at St. Mary's, he had retired at that point. So there, he's only one of many. I got to coach football for 25 years with Ron Lee. That was something that will always be special in my mind and my heart. It's been great to have had the opportunity to have started the wrestling program here at Onaga. I've had a long list of great assistant coaches over the years. Got several of them by putting an ad in the K-State Collegian and having college kids come out and help be one of the wrestling coaches, and we hit home runs on every single one of them. I won't list their names because those names don't mean anything to anybody anymore here probably, but those of us who were around during those times know that almost all those guys are really outstanding. I've gotten to teach with an awful lot of really outstanding people, and I really feel lucky and I really feel blessed to have had the kind of career I've had here at Onaga High School in USD 322. I think that's about all I have for you today, so thanks for listening.
Hello, I'm Adam McDaniel, the USD 322 Superintendent of Schools. I'm here today to answer 5 questions concerning the school district. The first question is, what does the district of USD 322 have to offer education-wise? Well, we currently offer for our high school students that want to go above and beyond the typical high school curriculum. We have a comprehensive amount of dual credit classes. We also have started to really look at expanding our elective classes. This year, for instance, for the first time in many years in USD 322, we have a FACS class that we're offering our students. We also have reestablished our business program. We are also working to increase and change what the technology looks like within our school district to be able to offer our students the opportunity to have access to better, up-to-date technology so that when they leave our school district, they're either ready to do something post-secondary or enter the workforce. We also offer the typical things that most school districts offer. We have our gifted program, we have our special services, and anything that students need as far as typical things that they would need in the classroom. If you look at this question, then what do we have to offer? Well, we have to offer all of our typical core classes as well, which we do comply with all of the state regulations with regards to all of our core classes as well as our elective classes. This year, we have moved from our modified block, which the true term for it was the intensified block schedule, to a 7-period school day. which has really changed the look of our building and changed the look of a lot of our classes as well. I think that our students would tell you that changing from that intensified block schedule to the 7-period traditional day schedule has been an interesting one for many of them, but I think for the most part a fairly positive one. Some of them have talked to me that they now find that they have a little more homework that they're taking home, but I don't know that that's an entirely bad thing. We're trying to also provide them a more college-like experience with what we're doing with our classes, moving maybe at a little bit faster pace, trying to get a little more information into all of our classes, and trying to really increase the rigor of what's happening within our classes as well. The second question is the history and success of state assessment testing across the district. During the No Child Left Behind era, USD 322 was very successful with state assessment testing, having achieved the standard of excellence on numerous tests throughout those years. And now we begin the transition into the Common Core, or College and Career Ready standard testing, which the first year was very rough. We got no scores back because of quite a few technical problems that existed with the test. Our students were not able to finish in some grade levels that first year due to technical problems. This last year was our first year completing the Kansas College and Career Ready Standards assessments that came through on the KITE, or the new and updated testing system. Overall, the district was fairly successful with those tests. One thing to keep in mind as you move from an old test that everybody's very familiar with and your teaching staff's very familiar with as far as how to prep and get students ready for it, to a brand new test that is constantly evolving and constantly changing and will ultimately become an adaptive style test for students to take. That becomes a very challenging aspect of teaching and getting students prepped for in the classroom. And so while we did fairly well, we found that we have several areas where we need to continue to work in. Our math in the lower elementary is an area that we need to continue to target, as well as in our middle school we found that we've got some reading areas that we need to continue to target. But we hope that one of the bright spots for our school district is this year we also started a 5-day-a-week, all-day preschool program. So whereas that will not provide us an instant growth in any assessments or any district data points, we do hope that down the road that's going to show some huge increase in our students. One of the problems that we found is our students are not coming into kindergarten entirely kindergarten ready. Those that were in our ECSE program or our early childhood program prior to our preschool program, we found were fairly ready for kindergarten. But that program was only a half-day program and was fairly limited in resources and fairly limited in what it could provide for our students. And so we're hoping that the comprehensive preschool program, whereas it will take a few years to get into our system and really be able to see the growth and help that it provides our students, as these first kids and those that go through the entire preschool program come through our system, we really hope to see not only increased state assessment data, but increased Ames web data, increased map data, and we hope that that really shows a huge growth throughout the entire process in our K-12 system. Number 3 would be, are there any cutbacks or changes to the budget you could foresee or I could foresee with the district in the future? I don't know that I would say I see any cutbacks coming to the district budget as of now. Now I say as of now very carefully because here just recently the Supreme Court ruled that the block grant school finance bill in the state of Kansas is unconstitutional. And within that ruling, one of the things that was stated to the Kansas State Legislature was you have until June 30th to find a funding system that is constitutional. Now, a caveat within that ruling that the Supreme Court stated was the legislature could easily take us back to the prior year funding or the pre-block grant funding. Just an example to that would be this year our full-time equivalency or FTE number for the school district was down slightly. So this year the block grant helped USD 322, whereas districts that were growing, the block grant actually cut them money, because in the previous system that would have cut money from our school district and given money to other districts where those students went. Our funding remained flat even though we lost student enrollment. So a lot of what happens as far as coming cutbacks and coming budget changes for us will really depend upon what the legislature decides in responding to that Supreme Court funding ruling. Do I anticipate changes in the future? I do indeed anticipate changes, and I do anticipate things that will hit our school district in the coming years. It's very hard to predict what those may be. One positive for our school district, if we were to have funding based upon our current enrollment as of this date right now, then we would actually be up in enrollment, and we would actually be up in dollars based upon the previous funding formula. So a lot of it really depends upon if we're able to hold our student population, what the legislature decides, and what the per student funding mechanism will be from the state of Kansas. As far as things that will be changing in the coming years, this past board meeting, our Board of Education approved a laptop initiative for 7th through 12th grades for the next school year. What that means for our school district is they've committed our school district to the next 4 years within our lease that they approved that we will have a one-to-one initiative for all 7th through 12th graders. So as far as things within the budget that will change, this year was our first year where we allocated a fairly sizable amount of money in our capital outlay fund to the purchase of those laptops over a period of time within the lease purchase agreement. And so with the board approving this agreement, that will commit us to that capital outlay purchase over the next 4 years. That doesn't necessarily change our budget, but it does reprioritize some things within our capital outlay fund. Again, some of that is dependent upon what happens with the legislature and what happens with funding over this next 6 to 8 months as the legislature completes their process. But either way, the board has committed that we are going to complete this process over the next 4 years, which is an exciting part for our school district, but a little bit scary when you talk about you don't necessarily know exactly what your funding is going to look like. So far, it does appear that this year we will not receive any cuts as of now with what the latest legislative updates show. So I'm hopeful that for the remainder of this school year, financially, there won't be any major changes to our school budget. Number 4. Could you give us an overview of the district through the next 5 years? I already spoke just a little bit concerning that with the laptop initiative and how that's really going to change and impact instruction. One other piece that I would mention on this question would be the district is going to face some interesting challenges. Right now, our high school is the smallest building in our school district. We have 94 students in our high school right now, and our class sizes are really the smallest that they've probably ever been as far as what I know of the history of our school district in the high school currently. Over these next 6 to 8 years, 3 to 5 years, short-term growth, long-term growth, we are going to see those numbers really shift back into the high school. And the interesting piece to that will be the numbers will grow in the high school. They appear to be staying fairly constant in the elementary school. And we right now have some space challenges throughout our building. And I see that probably continuing over the next 3 to 5, 6 to 8 years. And I say that a little bit with a caveat as well. A lot of that will depend upon where enrollment goes long term. You can project it, but it's not always an exact science. So when you start to have space problems, then you begin to have some need to look at, do you bring in temporary solutions to that? Do you look at some long-term facility solutions to that? I do believe that our high school and really middle school are adequate in facility needs, but we are probably going to be stretched very, very thin in the elementary over these next 3 to 5, 6 to 8 years if our numbers continue to hold as we project that they will. So those challenges are an excellent problem to have for a school district, but one that presents some interesting prospects as you talk about things changing with the state legislature and an ever-changing school budget. Overall, I would tell you that our school district is in good financial condition. Our school district has been fairly stable in enrollment over the last 3 to 5 years. And as I said, we were down slightly at the beginning of the year in enrollment, but where we're at as of now, we would actually be up. So whereas we bounced down, we did very quickly bounce back up. So I do project that our enrollment will stay rather close to where it is, grow maybe slightly. Our community is working to bring additional housing up as quickly as possible in the Wheaton, Havensville, and Onaga area. We have lots of young families that wish to come back to the area. That's a wonderful thing to have for a school and communities that are a part of your school district, and that always will provide some growth potential for the school district. So overall, again, I would say we're in great shape, both academically, financially, and as a school district. And I really do believe that our future looks positive, and that our future for our students will continue to show in a positive direction. Thank you.
So, Mrs. Howe, could you introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Mrs. Haug, and I have been with the school now for about 1.5 years, almost 2. And I've been a school counselor for a total of 4 years. Prior to that, I was a high school math teacher.
Okay. So, as high school counselor, what are some of the things you do here at Onaga High School?
Well, my primary role here at the high school is to make sure that we get students enrolled in classes that will help them to meet their goals for after graduation. If they want to be a veterinarian, if they want to be a welder, if they want to be work out on the farm. So my goal is to help them take the right classes with that, and then also to assist with personal and social issues that arise.
Could you go into the depth of some of the like the early release and the?
Oh, a little bit about enrollment.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of right in the middle of that right now. We are working on getting everybody enrolled for classes for next year. And so everybody has their colored sheet to pick their classes. Some of the exciting things I think we have going on this year are our Highland classes at Baileyville. It's called the Western Center. And they have several programs that are certificate programs that juniors and seniors can take. One example would be the welding program up there. They have a diesel mechanic program, precision ag, and building trades, and they also offer some classes in the health pathway. Another thing that some of our seniors will probably might want to take advantage of is we do an early release where they come to school for 5 hours, but then they can leave with permission, and there's a required form that they have to fill out to do that.
Yeah.
And then they can go work or possibly take a class at Wamego or Holton or Baileyville that would help them with what they want to do in the upcoming years. So all of that does require a special form though that comes through my office. Some of the other exciting things in enrollment that we've been talking about a lot, the current 8th grade class this year has developed their individual plans of study, and they are, this one doesn't have anything on it, but it's a sheet that helps them to track how they're going to get through high school. We're working, hopefully we'll get in with the freshmen before the end of this year so that they'll be ready for next year, because making the right choices, as you know, Michael, will help you your senior year to be taking classes you want to take. And then we also offer college classes through Highland Community College, and our coordinator for that is Ann Coker, and she assists the juniors and seniors in that process.
Yeah.
We do offer college English, college algebra, and some of those courses, and there are requirements for those that she would share with our students.
All right.
So that's kind of what enrollment's looking like.
Hello, I'm Mr. Fagan. I've been asked to give you some information about the Onaga FFA and a little bit of the history. 77 years ago, the Onaga FFA started. In fact, 2 years ago, we celebrated our 75 years of existence and had a lot of fun with that. We invited former members. A lot of older people came, which is really nice because they were still members of the community. And what's interesting about agriculture back in 77 years ago is a lot of the students that took these classes were the type of students that stayed around the community, ended up farming and becoming community members and leaders. The first agriculture teacher was hired. His name was Howard Wildman. And what's interesting to know, after 1 or 2 years of teaching, there's been some question of how many years it was, that he was drafted. So in the middle of the year, he had to go to war or join the military, and left the position open. And not being able to find very many agriculture teachers at that point, or FFA advisors, ag teachers, VOAG teachers, whatever you want to call them back then, seniors and community members of the area took over classes and would come in and taught the younger students. At that time, classes were called VOAG 1, VOAG 2, VOAG 3, and VOAG 4. And then in between that point and the Leonard Ottman era, there was several, 2 or 3 teachers, some question as to how many, but approximately 5 to 6 years after the FFA started here in Onaga, Leonard Ottman came. And Leonard Ottman is known really well in this community. He taught 37 years, a real lovable, likable guy, and he taught what is known as agriculture and FFA here in Onaga. Everybody still believes and lives Leonard Ottman style because of the older gentlemen that are in this community still are here and they believe in what he did, and he was a really good, lovable guy that everybody enjoyed and still remembered. My understanding is that when he had his funeral, people from all classes came to just watch it and view the body and see what happened because they really enjoyed the man. And in my opinion, that is more important to me because students came back and cherished their moments with Leonard Ottman. After Leonard Ottman, they hired on a couple different teachers in between here and there that were here either 1 or 2 years. Mr. Ehrenberg, Mr. Ring, and then they were able to find a home guy. And Mr. Tim Rodenkamp came back and he taught 11 years at Onaga High School. In fact, he was my agriculture teacher here at Onaga High School. And after 11 years, Tim decided to choose to go to the farm. And between Tim and myself was one teacher, Mr. Hudson. And then 22 years ago, they hired on this kid that knew nothing. Probably went out on a limb and hired him, but that was me. And I've been here 22 years, and within that time of era, we have seen the FFA flourish and grow, and we've done a lot of neat things. We've also had 2 teachers at different times. We had a Mr. Danny Davis here that was here 5 years. We had a Mr. Bush that has been 2 years. And then we have Mrs. Wag that's been here now 3 years, and the curriculum and the program is thriving. It's bigger than it ever has been. We have over 60 FFA members. And what is interesting about the curriculum is, including my dad, they'll talk about times where they used to go out and castrate pigs and help people in the community work cattle and do those types of things. We're not about cows, sows, and plows anymore. We're talking about agribusiness. We talk about why we do these things, why we're trying to make meat better, taste better. We're talking about palatability. We're talking about how we can make money in agriculture. Because quite frankly, the number of farmers in the community have gone down. Our acres have gone up. Our population has gone up. So we have to become more efficient about what we do. Some of the fun things that our program does is that we go to lots of career development events. Those used to be called ag contests. We call them career development events because to stay up with the times, and it is career development. Go to public speaking, livestock judging, meats judging, horse judging, public speaking, leadership school where we do opening and closing ceremonies. A lot of interesting things that the students like. We get involved. We've had things like hay rack rides. We've had swimming pool parties, different things. Basically what we do throughout the year is up to the students. What do they want to do? We try to keep this organization as student driven. We have a lot of some of the same things that we do every year. Our money makers are fruit sales and a service auction. For those of you that used to have a service auction, it used to be called a slave auction. To stay up with the times, the service auction, last year we made the most that we have ever made. We made well over $6,000, and that is attributed to the community, the people in this community, and how well or how much they want to support this program and how strongly they believe that it's important to this community.
Good morning, my name is Jeannie Wag, and I am the current FBLA advisor here at Onaga High School. FBLA stands for Future Business Leaders of America, and we have a very active FBLA chapter here at Onaga High School. Currently this school year we have about 30 members. Each year our chapter elects officers to serve as the leaders of our organization. Those officers can be anywhere between sophomore and seniors in age. The FBLA organization was designed for any students that are interested in the industry of business or a business-related career. And it has broadened out over the last few years to now include such things as healthcare or administration, nursing, computer sciences, technology. It also includes ag business, which has been a very popular contest here at Onaga. A lot of our students are already involved in other organizations such as FFA and Ks, and they find that FBLA is a good fit for them. We participate in District 3 competitions. There are several districts across the state of Kansas, and we are located in District 3. We usually travel here in the north central area of the state. This year we're getting ready to head to Wamego for our competition. 21 of our members of our chapter will be competing in a variety of events, anywhere from job interview to word processing applications, Excel applications, math contest. We are very strong in the business calculations. We also have a lot of interest in the business communications and journalism. So most of our students can find at least one or two areas that they wish to study and participate in at the contest area. If they qualify at district level contest, we then proceed to the State Leadership Conference. It's held at the Expo Center in Topeka. And last year we brought home 6 or 7 first place wins and about 14 second and third place wins from all of our members' competitions. So we showed up very strongly last year. We hope to do the same thing this year. Some of the other activities throughout the school year that we are involved in is we've created a new FBLA Pink Out Night, a fundraiser here at the local level to raise money for breast cancer awareness. The students participate at the home basketball games with concession stands and fundraising efforts. We also have a back to school welcome bag for the teachers, kind of to get everybody back in the mood of academic achievement and get people interested and find out more about FBLA and our organization. If you are at all interested, come to one of our meetings and ask some of our current members about the things that we are involved in or participate in. There's such a wide variety of careers nowadays that business information is useful. Anything that you're interested in can be found or located in one of our areas of FBLA.
Hello everyone, my name is Adam Kufal here today with the Onaga Media class. I'm from Wheaton and a 2005 graduate of Onaga High School. Currently, I'm a board member for the Onaga Football Alumni Organization and president of the Onaga High School Athletics Hall of Fame, which is probably what pertains to this segment more than anything. As a part of that organization, my committee members and I have done extensive research on the history of Onaga athletics. Our school has a proud history in sports that began in the early 1900s and has continued over the course of the last century. For the first sport at Onaga, it was boys basketball, which began right after the turn of the century. Onaga became a credited high school in the state of Kansas in 1899, and organized basketball came shortly after in the early 1900s. From an individual standpoint, it's difficult to pinpoint who the best player in Onaga history is, but a few names come to mind. Most recently, Riley Falk, one of the top scorers in Onaga history, finished his career in just 2012 and went on to play collegiately at Ottawa University. Craig Boswell started at Onaga for 4 years from 2002 to 2005 and is considered by many to be the best overall athlete in school's history. He starred in many sports at Onaga, but his best sport was definitely basketball. He too is one of the top scorers in school history and earned first-team All-State honors at the conclusion of his senior season. Before those two, the player that many think of is Daryl Dotson. The case can certainly be made that he is the best basketball player our school has ever seen. The son of longtime Onaga head coach Orville Dotson, Daryl was a 3-year starter from 1977 to 1979, scoring over 1,400 points in his career. He earned all-league honors all 3 of those seasons, made the all-area team twice, and was selected third-team All-State after his senior season. Daryl certainly had the most successful post-high school career of anyone from Onaga. He played 2 seasons at Neosho Junior College and was named conference MVP during his sophomore campaign. That earned him a scholarship at Arkansas State University. He was a 2-year letterman there in Jonesboro as a part-time starter his junior season and a full-time starter his senior year. He earned honorable mention all-conference honors after his senior campaign and left Arkansas State with the school record for field goal percentage, shooting 58% during his 2-year career. During his time there, he competed against future NBA Hall of Famers Joe Dumars and Karl Malone. There are several other players that could be considered the greatest basketball player in Onaga history, but they sometimes get lost in the discussion for several reasons. One such player is Don Crumbaker, who played in the 30s and was such a good football player that many forgot he was also an exceptional basketball player. Others get lost in the discussion because of when they played and because they didn't stand out on their teams as much as Falk, Boswell, and Dotson did. They were surrounded by great talent and played on great teams, so their entire group gets talked about more so than the individual. Several of those teams and players came in the late 1950s and mid to late 60s. Following a successful 18-4 campaign in 1958, Onaga had even more success in 1959. Experience was at a premium that year with 8 seniors and 2 juniors making up the varsity squad. Senior Larry Knipp led the team in scoring, while fellow seniors Dave Lobby and J.C. Schlegel and juniors L.J. Corcoran and Darrell Griffin helped guide the Buffaloes to a 21-3 record. Onaga won the league championship, league tournament, district tournament, then beat Hanover to earn a trip to the 1959 state tournament. There, Onaga would beat Mount Hope in the first round before losing to eventual state champion Natoma in the second round. The Buffaloes then knocked off Plains in the consolation game, taking home a third-place trophy. Then in the late 60s, Onaga had another string of highly successful runs, which started with the closing of Wheaton High School. In 1966, Onaga finished with a losing basketball season, but with Wheaton closing at the conclusion of that year, Onaga's roster would look completely different in 1967, and so would their basketball season. One player that made a huge difference was Kenny Bossy. The senior had already established himself as one of the top players in the state of Kansas during his first 3 years at Wheaton, and he made a similar impact at Onaga in his final year of high school. He isn't mentioned very often as one of the best players in Onaga history because he spent several years at Wheaton, but his 1 year at Onaga is possibly the best one-year performance of any player in school history. He led the entire Mid-East League in scoring that season, putting up 26.9 points per game. He earned First Team All-League, First Team All-Area, and First Team All-State honors after the season, and was named to the All-Tournament team after the state tournament. Dale Kufall and Milton Falk also came from Wheaton that year, and with Onaga holdovers Alan McKenzie and Jim Eisenbarth, Onaga improved their record by 20 wins as they started the 1967 season 25-0. They ripped through the Mid-East League with a 14-0 mark, beat St. George, Rossville, and Silver Lake for the league tournament championship, then knocked off Holton for the district tournament championship, and beat Valley Falls in the regional championship, taking a 24-0 record into the state tournament. After a first-round win over Harrington, Onaga fell to eventual state champion Inman by 10 points in the semifinals. Then in the consolation game, Onaga fell in overtime to College High of Pittsburgh, giving them a 25-2 record and a fourth-place state trophy. Onaga kept on winning through the end of the decade, going 19-4 in 1968 with a league tournament championship, and 2 years later in 1970 they went 21-4, winning the league championship, district tournament, and regional tournament before falling to Mound Ridge in the first round of the state tournament. But one last team we need to talk about was sandwiched in between the 68 and 70 seasons when Onaga saw a team get off to a start that was similar to the one they had seen just 2 years prior. In 1969, Onaga began the year with 22 straight victories. Led by 6'6" senior center Jim Eisenbarth and 6'3" senior forward Bobby Schwartz, the Buffaloes tore through the Mid-East League regular season before beating Alta Vista, Rossville, and Silver Lake to take home the league tournament title. Onaga then beat Riley County by 42 points and St. Mary's by 35 en route to a district tournament championship. Then came the regional tournament where Onaga beat Baileyville by 32 and Washington by 25, setting up a championship game matchup with Sabetha. Hotels in Manhattan were booked and fans were planning time off from work for the Buffaloes' run at a state title. Onaga dominated all season long. They were 22-0, and only 2 of those games were decided by single digits. And the team they had to beat to earn a trip to the state tournament, Sabetha, Onaga had already beaten by 16 earlier in the season. But on that snowy night in 1969, Sabetha would pull out a 42-39 win, ending Onaga's season with their only loss of the year, capping off a 22-1 campaign. Girls basketball is one of the next sports to come along at Onaga, and it features perhaps the best team in any sport in Onaga history. The 1987 girls basketball team season is very similar to that of the 67 and 69 boys teams, with one major difference, that being their run in the state tournament. The 87 girls team outscored their opponents by an average of 25 points per game during the regular season that year, scoring 90 points twice, 80 points another time, and 70 points 3 more times, winning the league championship and the league tournament along the way. They won 16 games in a row heading into sub-state, where they beat Lynn by 47 in the opening round. After that, the Lady Buffaloes knocked off league rival Centralia by 32, their third victory over the Panthers that season. Onaga then beat Riley County by 39 in the sub-state championship game, sending them to the state tournament. There, Onaga beat Linwood 80-33 in the opening round and followed that up with a 19-point win over Lincoln in the semifinals. In the championship game, Onaga finally got a game decided by single digits, but Southwestern Heights was still no match as Onaga beat the Mustangs 56-47, giving the school their first state championship in girls basketball history. The Buffaloes finished the season with 22 straight wins en route to a 24-1 record overall. Rhonda Lee is considered by some to be the best female basketball player in school history, and her performance that season certainly supports that argument. She led the team in scoring in 1987, earning first-team All-League honors, followed by a first-team All-State selection after the season. Lori Kufal, Erin McNally, and Mary Nolte all grabbed second team All-League honors that year, while Nolte was also named honorable mention All-State. Lee and Kufal both went on to Washburn to play collegiately after that year. That was definitely the best girls basketball season in school history, but it wasn't the only great one. The following year, in 1988, the girls won the league tournament again and took third at the state tournament. In 1989, Onaga got the closest they have ever gotten to a second state title, winning the league championship and taking second at the state tournament. But what also happened in 1989 was the emergence of a young athlete that is also in the discussion of greatest female athlete in school history. Sophomore Dana Pollock began to emerge as a tremendous athlete, and what she accomplished during her career was phenomenal. As a junior in 1990, Pollock helped Onaga win another Nemaha Valley League tournament title, but the girls came up short in the sub-state championship game, ending a streak of 3 straight top 3 finishes at the state tournament. But as a senior in 1991, Pollock had the best individual season in Onaga basketball history, boys or girls. The team took second in the league tournament and finished 4th at the state tournament, another strong finish for the girls basketball program, their 4th top 4 finish in a 5-year stretch. After the season, Pollock was named First Team All-League and First Team All-State. Then the Topeka Capital Journal named her to the First Team All-Classes squad, distinguishing her as one of the top 5 players in the state of Kansas 1 through 6A. She's the only Onaga athlete at this time to ever be named to the All-Classes team in any sport. The Manhattan Mercury then named her the Flint Hills Player of the Year, and USA Today named her to their honorable mention All-American team. Dana was a dominant volleyball player as well, and her accolades on the track were distinguished also. She qualified for the state track meet in 6 different events during her high school career, several of which she qualified for multiple times. Her fastest 400-meter dash time still stands as the Onaga school record. And at the conclusion of her senior year, Dana was named the 1991 Kansas Female Athlete of the Year, solidifying her spot amongst the elite in Onaga athletic history. Following her graduation, Dana played college basketball at Kansas State University. During all of these great women's basketball seasons, the man in charge was Dave Schmidt. Schmidt coached for 19 seasons at Onaga, finishing his career with 263 wins and 162 losses. He won 6 straight league titles at one point in his career and took the girls basketball team to the state tournament in 3 different decades. Schmidt also had a successful run as the volleyball coach at Onaga for 9 seasons. He finished his career with a 190 and 120 record, taking 3rd at the 2004 state tournament. That is the best volleyball finish in school history. To this point, no other coach has had the success in girls basketball or in volleyball at Onaga that Dave Schmidt has had. One other individual that should be mentioned when talking about volleyball and girls basketball is Becky Zabel, a 2005 graduate of Onaga. Zabel was a part of perhaps the best girls sports year in school history. During the 2004-2005 school year, Zabel earned First Team All-League and First Team All-State honors in both volleyball and basketball, as her team took home 3rd and 4th place state trophies in those 2 sports respectively. Zabel also set new league and school records in the javelin that year during the track and field season. Fellow senior Jenny Paulson won the 100-meter dash state championship as well that year, and the team as a whole was a dropped baton in the 4x1 relay away from walking away with the team state title. With the scratch in what was the team's best event going into the state track meet, Onaga still finished 4th in the overall standings, giving the girls 3 top 4 state finishes in the 3 major team sports. Following her senior year, Zabel was named a finalist for the High School Heisman Kansas State Scholar Award, given to the top female student athlete in the state of Kansas. She then went on and continued her basketball career at Cloud County Community College before transferring to Emporia State University to finish off her athletic career. One can argue for days about who is the best overall female athlete in school history when it pertains to volleyball, basketball, and track, making good arguments for Rhonda Lee, Dana Pollock, and Becky Zabel, but the single best athlete in school history, boys or girls, as it pertains to one sport is not debatable. It's the one question that when it comes up in Onaga athletics talk that there is only one answer for. The greatest athlete in school history debate starts and ends with track star Janet Haskin. A 7-time gold medalist at Onaga, Janet won her first state title as a sophomore in 1986 in the 3,200-meter run, while also taking silver in the 1,600. Her junior year, she took gold in 3 events, the 800, 1,600, and 3,200, setting 2A state records in the latter 2 events. Haskin then repeated that performance in 1988 as a senior, winning 3 golds again and breaking her own state records in the 1600 and 3200. Her times in those 2 events were the fastest in any classification at the state meet that year, and her 3200 meter time was 0.2 seconds from being the fastest time in the entire nation. Her performances that year in the 1600 and 3200 still stand today as the Kansas 2A state records. After high school, Janet ran track and cross country at Kansas State University from 1988 to 1992. She was a 3-time All-American while there, once in cross country, once in indoor track, and once in outdoor track. She won a Big 8 Athlete of the Week award while there and was named to the Big 8 All-Academic First Team. She set the 5,000 meter indoor track and field school record at Kansas State and also won the 10,000 meter NCAA Division I National Championship in 1990. Haskin was later inducted into the Kansas State University Track and Field Hall of Honor and was also named in Purple Pinnacle as one of the top 40 athletes in the history of Kansas State University athletics. Another sport at Onaga that should be mentioned is one of the youngest sports in school history. The wrestling program started in 1985 and until the 2015-2016 season had seen just one head coach. Tim Kite started the program and oversaw it for 30 years before retiring in 2015. His assistant that year, Cody Merriman, became the head coach the following season. In the short history of wrestling at Onaga, the best individual season came from the program's best wrestler. Keith Blasky was a 3-time state qualifier, finishing 26-7 as a junior and taking home a silver medal, the highest state finish in school history. As a senior in 1995, Blasky won his first 24 matches of the season before falling in the semifinal round of the state meet. He bounced back in the consolation match, pinning his opponent in the first round to finish the season with a 25-1 record and a 3rd place state finish. After high school, Blasky wrestled at Fort Hays State University. There he was a 3-time Division II All-American, placing 5th at the national meet as a sophomore, 4th as a junior, and 2nd as a senior. In 2006, Blasky was inducted into the Fort Hays State Athletics Hall of Fame. And finally, the sport that has seen the most consistent success at Onaga, it's football. Football will turn 100 at the beginning of the 2016 season, their first year being in 1916. Over the last 100 seasons, Onaga has had some of the best small school players and teams in the state of Kansas. When discussing the best football players in school history, it's no coincidence that they played on some of the great teams in school history. The mid-1930s, Onaga football teams were some of the best in school history. In 1933, under the direction of head coach Avery Eddy, Onaga went 8-1-1, shutting out 7 of the 10 teams they played that year. Only one player that was not a junior or senior saw action that season, the starting right guard by the name of Don Crumbaker. Crumbaker would move to the fullback position for his junior and senior seasons, the main ball carrier in offenses of that time. His final season, the Onaga Bearcats, that was our school's mascot until 1939 when the switch was made to Buffaloes, went 7-1-2, shutting out 7 of the teams they faced in 1935. That season included wins over Holton, Seneca, Manhattan, Centralia, and a victory over Rossville, the Bulldogs' only loss of the season. After high school, Crumbaker played football at Kansas State University. He was named a team captain his senior year in 1939. That season, he earned first-team All-Big Six honors as a tight end and played in the East-West game at the conclusion of the season, which was the premier college football all-star game of the time. Following his college career, Crumbaker was selected 132nd overall by the Philadelphia Eagles in the 1940 NFL Draft. Unfortunately, any NFL dreams vanished as Crumbaker enlisted in the Navy just in time for World War II. He served as an Australian cruiser on an Australian cruiser as a liaison officer for 18 months in New Guinea and the Philippines during World War II, and in 1970, Crumbaker was elected to the Kansas House of Representatives and served as chairman and vice chairman of the Education Committee for 15 years. He served in the legislature from 1970 until his retirement in 1992. In Onaga's proud football history, 6 times Onaga finished their season undefeated. The first one came in 1940 under the direction of head coach Lloyd Thomas. The Buffaloes finished 8-0, pitching 6 shutouts and outscoring their opponents 147-13 along the way. The next two undefeated seasons came in 1957 and 1958, and again, one of the school's best individuals highlighted two of the school's best teams. After a 6-2-1 league championship season in 1956, Onaga returned a plethora of starters for the 57 campaign. Senior quarterback Fred Schwartz threw for over 500 yards and was second on the team in rushing, while budding star sophomore running back L.J. Corcoran led the team in rushing. Onaga went 8-0, winning their second league title in as many seasons. The following season was even better. Corcoran led the team in rushing again as a junior, but senior Dave Lobby wasn't far behind and actually had one more touchdown than the junior Corcoran. With those two in the backfield and J.C. Schlegel throwing to Larry Knipp, Onaga scored 44.3 points per game in 1958, a record that still stands to this day. The 2001 team is the only one who has come within 5 points of that mark when they averaged 38.9 points per game. Corcoran led the team in rushing the following season as well when Onaga went 6-2. He was selected to be a part of the inaugural Onaga High School Athletics Hall of Fame class in 2016. He was a 4-year letterman at Onaga in both football and basketball, and later starred at the College of Emporia. He started on both offense and defense his junior and senior years there, and was a team captain in his final season. His teams went undefeated 2 of those years as well, winning KCAC championships both seasons. After college, Corcoran went to work for the newly founded NASA, where he had a distinguished career, and in 2010 he was elected into the College of Emporia Hall of Fame for both athletics and academics. Much like boys basketball, success was sustained over the next few years, but the late 60s brought another string of elite teams. In 1968, Onaga went undefeated, led by seniors Bobby Schwartz, Jim Eisenbarth, and John Eddy, and 2 juniors who had set the standard for years to come on how to play football at Onaga. The 9-0 season was the 5th undefeated season in school history and the 2nd in as many years. Unfortunately, those 5 undefeated seasons and the many other 1- and 2-loss seasons to that point came before a playoff system in the state of Kansas was put into place. But in 1969, the first playoff system was devised, and it just so happened that once again, Onaga had the best team in the state in Class 2A. The 2 juniors mentioned before were now seniors, and with Mark Marco under center, Rich Lowry playing fullback, and the best defense in school history, a state championship should have been the end result to that season. Onaga not only went undefeated for the 3rd straight season and for the 6th time in school history, but they only allowed 1 team to score on them all year. They went 9-0, outscoring their opponents 337-8, pitching 8 shutouts, the only touchdown allowed coming in a 41-8 beatdown of Silver Lake, capturing the school's 4th straight Mid-East League title. Although a playoff system was in place, the original system was severely flawed. It was based off of a point system, taking into account a team's schedule. So playing a team that was in a classification above you earned you more points, regardless of the outcome of said game. So despite the fact they were 8-1, Sacred Heart was selected to play in the inaugural state championship game. The reason being that season they had played Wamego, who was in a higher classification. It didn't matter that Wamego had thoroughly beaten Sacred Heart. The fact that they had played Wamego gave Sacred Heart the chance to play in the state championship game, a game they won. Needless to say, the flawed system was changed shortly after that year, but it was a season too late for one of the best teams in school history. After the championship game was concluded, most major publications still ranked Onaga number 1 in Class 2A, including the Kansas City Star. It was obvious who the best team in the state was, but alas, the championship banner is hanging in Salina instead of Onaga. Shortly after that season, Richard Rosenfield retired as head coach at Onaga. His 126 wins and 24 seasons at the helm of the program are both the 2nd most in school history by a long shot. He won 9 league titles from 1948 and 1971 and presided over 5 of Onaga's 6 undefeated seasons. The football and track complex that Onaga uses today are named in his honor. The 6 seasons that followed Rosenfield were unsuccessful ones, to put it lightly, as Onaga went through 4 coaches during that stretch. It wasn't until 1978 when Onaga found their Rosenfield equivalent, a former Kansas State University baseball player who was a former high school teammate of John Riggins. Ron Lee is the only coach to top Rosenfield's wins and seasons totals, amassing 158 wins in his 27 years at the helm of Onaga football from 1978 to 2004. He returned Onaga football to its winning ways and sustained it for a long period of time. Although he never had an undefeated season like Rosenfield, his run from 1986 to 2004 was astonishingly consistent. a stretch the likes of which has never been seen at Onaga, including during the Rosenfield era. During that 19-year stretch, Lee only had one team that finished with a losing season. Ironically, that 4-6 team of 1988 actually won the district championship that year. There were many players that highlighted those seasons. Matt Elder led the entire state of Kansas in rushing in 1987, as he and his twin brother Mark led Onaga to the cusp of a state championship game, falling to Frontenac in the sub-state championship game on a late touchdown. In 1992, Flint Hills Player of the Year Ben Colderman and one of the greatest linemen in school history, David Caff, led Onaga to 10 wins, the most in school history, and another sub-state championship game appearance. But after holding Riley County to just 8 total yards of offense in the regional title game, it was Frontenac once again who ended Onaga's hopes of a shot at the state title. Then there was Brian King on the 1998 squad. King finished his career with over 5,000 rushing yards, a total that at the time ranked in the top 10 in the history of Kansas high school football. His junior year, Onaga went 8-1 in 1998, their only loss coming by a field goal in overtime to Rossville after an inadvertent whistle cost Onaga a game-winning touchdown at the end of regulation. Because only one team from each district got to go to the state playoffs that year, Onaga was forced to sit out the postseason despite being ranked in the top 5 in the state the entire year. The 90s were filled with great players at Onaga, but the teams they formed gave Onaga its best decade of football since the 60s, and it may be the best decade of football overall, being the only one in school history that never saw a losing season. In the 2000s, there were several players who dominated in high school and went on to have successful collegiate careers as well. J.J. Richard ran wild in 2000 as Onaga went 6-3. He later starred at wide receiver at Emporia State University, where he set the NCAA Division II record for catches in a season. The 2001 team suffered the same fate as the squad of 1998 as they finished 8-1, their only loss coming in district play, meaning they had to stay home during the postseason, despite the fact they were also ranked in the top 5 in the state all season and scored nearly 40 points per game. Of course, Keisha changed the system the very next year, and from that point on, 2 teams from each district earned spots in the postseason. Had that system been put in place just 4 years prior, who knows how the 1998 and 2000 seasons would have ended. The final player to discuss in the 2000s that must be mentioned is Craig Boswell, considered by many to be the best overall male athlete in school history. Boswell led his team to a 7-4 record his senior year, setting the school record for rushing yards and rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in a single season. He earned first-team All-State honors at the end of the year, and after a year of college basketball at Cloud County Community College, Boswell switched to football his sophomore year. After 1 year at Hutch JUCO, Boswell transferred to Kansas State University, where he played football for the next 2 seasons. I would also be remiss if I didn't briefly mention 2 other athletes with Onaga connections. The first is Cy Griffiths, a Canadian athlete of the early 20th century. In ice hockey, Griffiths was a 2-time Stanley Cup winner with the 1907 Kenora Thistles and the 1915 Vancouver Millionaires. He is an inductee of the NHL Hall of Fame. He was born in Onaga, and his family later moved to Rat Portage, Ontario, where he excelled in many sports, including ice hockey. It was here that he became a player for the local amateur hockey club, the Rat Portage Thistles. The other athlete is Frank Bushy. Our school district is comprised of 3 towns, Onaga, Wheaton, and Havensville. Although at one time all 3 towns had their own high school, they have all 3 consolidated to what we now know as Onaga High School. But before those consolidations happened, Francis Clyde Bushy was a pitcher who played for the Boston Red Sox in 1927 and 1930. Bushy was born in Wheaton and started both baseball and basketball at Wheaton High School. In a two-season career for the Red Sox, Bushy posted an 0-1 record with 4 strikeouts and a 6+ ERA in 31 1/3 innings pitched. So as you can see, Onaga has a long and rich athletic tradition. Although sometimes history is forgotten or never even learned by our society today, it's important to remember all of the great individuals and great teams that have contributed to Onaga athletics. Onaga has always been known as an athletic power in this area of Kansas, and it's important that we remember the people and teams that have contributed to that proud history.